the person who had done the study says that if the wrong answer, and this is really kind of what the best quote in this study is, if the wrong answer is contrary to their ideological positions, we hypothesize that is going to create the incentive to scrutinize that information and figure out another way to understand it. So if 2 plus 2 equals 4, I'm sorry, yeah, if it equals 4, but you want it to equal 5 for some reason because you believe that that's what the right answer is, you're going to try to find a way to make it work. And I think that's what both liberals and conservatives tend to do on some controversial topics. Now, there are some topics that I think that we're absolutely right on because of the evidence and because of studies.
So in the end, what you're saying is this is tribal behavior.
Yes, this is tribal behavior.
Okay,
and to a side.
I don't necessarily believe that tribal behavior is a bad attribute of humans. Even if that is the case, because there's a difference between forcing yourself down certain paths to find the information that you want to find, and then when the abundance actually becomes, so objective or subjective to you that you have to, then really look inside or be taught to look inside. I'm just saying I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing to scrutinize opposition thing and to look for the answer that you want to find. When you want something to be that way and you look for information like that, that might not always be a bad idea as long as in the end you are willing to change your mind,
But and that's the problem. That's the problem with us humans, is that we like to be right. Even when presented evidence of the contrary, if you still want to believe that 2 plus 2 equals 5, and you're dead set on it because it's going to crush your entire worldview, then yeah, you're going to be like, you know what? It works because it works. God did it. So,
when your fallacies start shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and you have less places to insert the wrong point or the wrong truth, eventually you kind of do run out of those spaces,
But then it gets into a problem of cognitive dissonance as well.
And then you found a creationism museum.
And that it gets struck by lightning. Ironically. But don't you get it though? That whole cognitive dissonance. It's no matter how much evidence and no matter how many times you get backed into a corner,
birth certificate,
a logical corner, you still won't believe it because you can't. You just don't want to, and it just comes down to not changing your mind. And then, I think a lot of people would just rather ignore the truth that's out there instead of having it challenge their worldview. And this is a lot of what this study is saying.
Exactly. I mean, you look at the birthers there. It doesn't matter what you show these people. They've got it in their head that he wasn't born in the U.S. and he's not an American citizen.
It's a conspiracy. And the mental gymnastics that you have to do to believe something like that.
And they're still going to say that birth certificate is fake.
Yeah.
And in the end, after all of that, there is a point to it that we're still arguing the beginning point of that birth certificate issue. Still arguing the beginning point of it. And when you can't get past that, you can't have a smart conversation about the next step when you're still stuck on that. But then if you go back to the birth certificate and you say, okay, now hold on. Let's say that he wasn't born in Hawaii. Let's say that he was born overseas. Guess what? His mother was still an American citizen, so he still is a natural-born citizen, legitimate of becoming the president of the United States, even if he was born overseas, you stupid fucks.
Right there, because the study flat out says that. That if you don't want to believe something, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, you're not going to believe it.
And look at that. Kevin didn't have to do a study to figure it out.
No, he didn't. Once again, this is a confirmation study.
I would like to say that one side does it more than the other, but it's untrue. When we're talking about this study in particular, it's untrue. But it unfortunately, what the study does is gives both sides an equal standing in the way they access information. And people will use that study improperly and say that it gives confirmation to the fact that both sides do something wrong equally, and that's very untrue. You know, both sides do things that are wrong, but one is way proportionally higher than the other.
Like,
and that study should not be a confirmation that there's any way, you know, equal grounds in that. It's the equivalent of giving somebody who, let's say, is a birther airtime and treating their opinion like they have a right to speak, like treating their opinion that it is equal to yours and that they have an equal right to speak as yours. For news broadcasters not to mediate in between that and say, look, you are completely out of line here and your opinion is so off base that you shouldn't, that it's hard to give validity to anything you say when you're still stuck in this back birtherism point of view, that that future things that you say can become so invalidated by that. It just seems ridiculous to me that you even have the same platform to speak on as somebody who looks things objectively and is looking for the truth. Whether their political ideology is different or not, but political ideology needs to be far different from simple facts. And when somebody can't just accept the simple facts, then they shouldn't, their point of view should just not be given the same validity, and I just get really sickened by that.
There's so many.
I agree. I absolutely agree that there's this. It's a mistake to assume that two sides of an argument are always equally valid, and there are some things that are open for opinion, and both are valid, and there are some things that are just plain fact that just need to be accepted as fact, and that can't really be debated, even though we continue to debate them, because
like 90%, 97% of scientists agree that climate change is happening and it's man-made, and it's influenced by man.
Conspiracy. That's all a conspiracy. It's only the 3% that disagree with the other 97% that are actually telling the truth.
Well, and I bet those 3% are also paid for by Koch Industries.
Well, you have to imagine that some of that though is based on fact. They do have, but they only present certain parts of the facts, which correlates with the study that Jeff is talking about, the tribalness of it. If you talk about like CO2 levels, when we say, well, yeah, but man's only contributing like the small amount, like 3.5% of the total carbon uplift is all that we're contributing to this. So if it's a problem, this is all that we're contributing to the world. Yeah, but the problem with that 3% that we're contributing is that it is 100% of the overage of what the Earth can naturally cycle. So even if we're talking about like we only put up 3 billion tons of carbon, and the Earth normally puts up 700 billion tons of carbon into the atmosphere, it's okay if the Earth can cycle that 700 billion back, but when it becomes 703 billion, that 3 billion that we're putting in there is totally fucking up the cycle, then it's man-made. Then it's our problem, and we need to fit into the natural cycle. And that's a big problem that a lot of people can't understand. And those numbers aren't exactly accurate, but I do have the accurate numbers on the Verity Nation website.
What they love to do is
that's a really good
take
point.
these numbers and confuse people with them.
Right. So now when you get 3% of the scientists even that don't even understand that. Like there's scientists who cannot think critically. Yeah, they have their education, they have the degree, but just because you were good in school doesn't mean that you're more intelligent. That would be like saying that we're more intelligent than people were 4,000 years ago, and we're not. We still have the same DNA. We have the exact same intelligence. You might think you're more intelligent, but you're not. You just know different information. Do you know that those people used to like 3,000 and 4,000 years ago, people used to remember 5,000 stories and songs that bards used to come and travel through the land and teach people these songs and these lyrics, and whole societies could remember as many as 5,000 of these parodies. Now imagine that now today. You couldn't remember 5,000 of those songs. I'll guarantee you couldn't, unless you got rid of all the current other knowledge that you have that is every day in the use of your smartphone and how to use a computer and how to drive a car. They didn't have to do all that, so their knowledge was concentrated differently. We're not smarter. We're just our intellect is just used differently than what it was then. So when you look at that and you go, okay, well, some scientists, they might have done really well in school. That doesn't mean that they still look at things objectively enough. And if you have a few scientists that want to have different answers, in line with the study that you're saying, they want to have different answers, they're only going to present the portion that says that, well, people are only putting up 6 billion tons of carbon into the air, so that's nothing. The Earth puts up 700 billion, and that gives a base argument, and
there's kind of another part of that is, once again, I agree with what you're saying. Like, just because you do good in school doesn't mean you're a smart person. I mean, what's mostly a giant part of being in school? Taking tests, taking memorized, standardized tests.
Right.
That doesn't make you smart. Taking a test and memorizing it does not make you smart. You do not have to critically think when all you have to do is rote memorization. And so that's a
makes
really
you good at taking tests.
Yeah, it helps you take the test, but it doesn't guarantee you're learning anything. You could go on a bender the next night and forget everything. You don't even have to go on a bender. You just go home, go to bed, and it's gone. And yes, they can go and use all of this sort of information, these facts and figures, and cherry pick them in order to, confuse you. Go, see, not a problem. We already have tons of carbon in the atmosphere. What's a little bit more? It's just a tiny little, addition to it. So global warming, who cares?
The temperature's only risen a few degrees. What does that matter?
I want to actually end out the segment and let Brian get the last word on this one.
I just want to add on to something that got muddled in the waters there. We were talking about the birther issue and whatnot, and that all circles around to their current birther issue with Ted Cruz there, buddy Ted Cruz. And you know what? When the issue arises to figure out whether he's American or not, you guys, you can all claim that he's not American as much as you want, but unfortunately, from up here north of the border, we're not going to support you by claiming he's one of ours.
Are you sure? We don't want him.
And
you guys don't want him too, huh?
We don't want to admit he's ours either.
Oh, man.